wouldn't you hesitate if you saw Hu Yaobang purged after 40 years?
The whole arrangement of succession that had been promoted personally by Deng Xiaoping in the past few years just collapsed.
Well, it's always dangerous to be number two.
Hu Yaobang has always courted danger in his career. This time he fell. His rise and fall, tonight on Focus. On the first day of 1987, Chinese leaders saw students again at their doorsteps demanding more democracy. This was the biggest student movement in China in several years. It was sparked off in Anhui in early December, quickly spread to neighboring Shanghai, and flared across to over 10 cities. The state initially took a conciliatory attitude, but the student unrest was later branded as a threat to social stability and unity. Was the student movement spontaneous or engineered by some factions within the Communist Party?
There's a rumor saying there's official behind the student demonstration in some cities. But when the student demonstration spread to other cities, I don't think it was engineered by officials. So we can say that it's well, at least in the major cities, some major cities, they are spontaneous.
This China correspondent says the roots of the student demonstrations dated back to at least a year.
I think that the reports making it seem as though the student demonstrations were sparked by a few hot-headed academics, a few liberals who took the political reform debate too far, is to mistake the events of the last 6 weeks out of their context. Let's look at the whole year. In March, Deng Xiaoping launched political reform and specific issues internally. In July, Hu Yaobang's protege, the propaganda chief Zhu Hozi, publicly announced them. In August, Deng went to Beidaihe, the resort, and asked that the party approve these to be put on the agenda for the resolution which we saw in September. They refused. It was a serious setback for Deng.
For the past few years, Deng Xiaoping has managed to keep China's door open, despite obstacles from conservatives. Some are said to be unhappy with the changes brought about by the economic reforms, such as calls for more democracy and freedom. Some old guards have shown signs of displeasure with proposals of political reforms that have asked for a pullback.
I think the student demonstrations were not an initiative. They were a response, in other words, to a crescendo of debate over political reform, over the separation of the party from the state, over a review of the balance between central and provincial authority, over means to judge the performance of party cadres, which was met immediately by a conservative counteroffensive. The students were reacting then to keep the momentum of the political reform debate heard.
But this West German journalist says the student movement had been orchestrated, but the plan backfired.
Student demonstrations in China never have been spontaneous, but always students have been used by the Communist Party for their own good. I think in order to save the reform, somebody engineered the student unrest a month ago, 2 months ago, but then they developed their own dynamic and became much more than they intended to be. But to support my thesis that they were not spontaneous, I want to point out that they have stopped. So I think they were cold and then stopped.
Life in the universities has now gone back to normal. Most students were not affected. But some intellectuals blamed for instigating the demonstrations have now been expelled from the party. One of them was charged for spreading bourgeois liberalism. This was Shanghai writer Wang Ruwang. Another was a university vice president from Anhui. He was criticized for leading post-secondary schools away from the socialist road, thus breaching the party guidelines. This man is Fang Lijie.
I don't see this time as a purge. because we can see that the vaccination, well, the vaccination of foreign-aid, etc., from the party doesn't mean that he has to go to the countryside to labor, but rather he can still keep his position as a researcher in the party. I think this is a very civilized outcome, well, compared with the bitter history of the past. And what the Chinese leader nowadays try to do is just to convince the people of China, saying that the change is not a purge, and it's only limited individuals.
This lawyer is a former U.S. diplomat in China. He's also a member of the American Chamber of Commerce, or AmCham.
That intellectual freedom is confined to certain areas, and that when you touch upon, there's certain areas that are still sensitive and having to do with internal political issues, and please confine yourself to other areas. I think that's the message. And it's the old, as the Chinese proverb goes, it's we kill the chicken, although these were more important than chickens to let the monkeys see. And I think it's to make a point.
The point was made on a Chinese national television broadcast last Friday. It was announced that 71-year-old Hu Yaobang resigned as the party's general secretary. He was charged for failing to keep the party in line. Hu has been a longtime associate of Deng Xiaoping. Born in 1915 in Hunan province, Hu took part in the Long March and held various key positions before the communists came to power in 1949. During the Cultural Revolution, Hu Yaobang, like Deng Xiaoping, was also a target of Mao Zedong's purge. Most of his years were spent either banished to the countryside or placed under house arrest. In 1974, Mao Zedong reinstated Deng Xiaoping and Hu Yaobang because the late Premier Zhou Enlai fell ill. Hu was posted to the State Academy of Science. In 1976, Deng Xiaoping was purged again for resurrecting the rightist movement. In March of the same year, Hu Yaobang was branded a capitalist roader for saying that science and technology, instead of class struggle, was the locomotive of history. After the death of Mao and the fall of the Gang of Four, Hu Yaobang's political career advanced. Thereafter, he was seen as the closest ally of Deng Xiaoping and his most likely successor. He was made party chairman in June 1982, and when the post was abolished that September,